Over from bestweatherinc.com. Going to talk to you today about its short covering in the grain markets this past week. Were you long corn and beans last summer with all this bogus talk of La Nina a year ago? We were bearish on second guessing models in that La Nina would not actually form. One trade alone, like being short corn and beans last summer, paid for Weather Wealth, our newsletter, for 5 years. Do you hedge crops now? Will we have a drought this summer? Stay tuned and subscribe to a 2-week free trial period of the Weather Wealth, strategies in coffee, longer term trading ideas with an El Nino neutral phenomenon that may become a La Nina by the fall and winter again. If it does, that could create problems in South America next winter, their summer. But to find out our strategies and weather forecasts for the spring and summer markets, get a free report on your right there today. You can click on the link at the bottom of this report. So, identifying short covering, sudden reversals with high volumes of markets. The market volume increases, declining interest in actually a particular commodity, intraday price swings, falling open interest with rising prices. Really, the corn market is the only one that exhibited some of these factors this past week. The rally in wheat was probably very short term. Corn is rallying on demand issues and very tight stocks. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So, in our newsletter about a month and a half ago, we recommended shorting wheat. Traders that may have taken this advice could have made 50 to 60 cents on my forecast, second guessing models. The drought would ease in Kansas to Texas, but now there's some concerns about crops in other parts of the world. Some frost in Russia, heat in China, but I'm not necessarily sure, other than short covering, as we've seen a change in volume and liquidity here over the last week, we're going to go into any major bull market. So one thing we look at, of course, when you see short covering is a commitment of traders. Nothing really new with this. Wheat shorts have been well over 70% for quite a long time. And that heat you see there, 100 degrees, that's hurting about a third of the China wheat crop, helped to create a short covering rally in wheat this past week. Question becomes, will China import wheat? And normally they don't do this to the end of the year. They have very large grain reserves right now, so I don't really know if that's going to be a major bullish factor by any means in the wheat market, just because China has some drought concerns. News stories this last week, after the bearish sell-off in the Kansas through Texas drought breaking the last few weeks, news services talking about all this frost and dryness in Russia also helped rally the wheat market back. You can see there a little bit of red over Ukraine and Western Russia, but not a disaster by any means. So with rains in the forecast there on the bottom right in green over the next week to 2 weeks, I can't say we're looking at really a terrible crop by any means in the Russian wheat areas. Australia's been hot and dry, record heat. They're getting some rains finally in New South Wales. If anything, there's been flooding. More consistent rains are actually needed here over the next a week or two to finish up planting and before the crop goes into dormancy. And then with that El Nino neutral, if we go into a La Nina by the fall, which is their spring, then the crops can recover when they come out of dormancy in Australia later on this year. Seasonally, wheat prices go lower, but definitely there's some concerns also with flooding in some of the soft red areas of the United States. Heavy rains this next week in Oklahoma and Texas may cause some disease issues. So net, after a bearish outlook in wheat, I'm kind of more neutral, maybe even slightly friendly here in the short term. And then if we dry out, wheat prices may go lower later on in June. Corn, so had a big sell-off in corn on my forecast a month ago of great planting weather and the drought easing in the Northwest Corn Belt, but the global stock situation is still very, very tight, and that's causing concerns about it. What if we have a hot summer? Wheat market pulled up corn a little bit this week. We went from a net long position in corn to a short position, and when you see people go into short positions, it tends to create short covering with any little news at all, particularly with tight stocks. That was a recommendation about a month ago to sell corn, as I predicted the drought would ease, at least for now, in the western Corn Belt and Plains, and we'd have great planting weather. Yeah, it's a little bit cool, but it's going to warm up. It's not really a big deal. The key is going to be, of course, July weather and what happens then. You can see how the drought has eased over the last 6 weeks, particularly over Texas through through parts of Oklahoma there, which was used to be in yellow and red with moderate to severe droughts, now more neutral. Better conditions, even parts of the northern and western Corn Belt. Even though they're in a little bit of a drought situation, that's 1 or 2 feet down in the soil. The topsoil moisture, for the most part, is excellent for planting. So unless that drought re-intensifies by June and July, the odds of December corn going up to $5, for example, is pretty unlikely. So what will I be using in my newsletter here over the next few months to advise farmers and traders around the world in the grain market? Record tornado season. You've heard about it from Kentucky to Texas. Thousands of people have been injured, hundreds killed over the last month or two, and we have an El Nino neutral situation. So I'm going to be looking at analog years, the most active tornado seasons. El Nino neutral phenomenons are coming up with long-term strategies in my newsletter. Download a free report that I wrote about a month ago at the bottom of the page, or a 14-day free trial period. One trade alone pays for the newsletter for 4 or 5 years. Forget all these other advisory services, being late to the game with La Nina or El Nino, or looking at standard GFS and European models. We try to second guess that ahead of the pack and give you better forecasts and trading ideas. Enjoy.